I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everyone, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Boast AI and Traction Conf. Super excited for today's session on everything you need to know to create an operating plan for 2021 that's going to help you grow and scale. I have with me two experts in the finance and accounting space, Martin, CEO of Jirav, and Blake, who's also a CPA, runs one of the most popular accounting podcasts and all things accounting expert. So without further ado, I'll let you guys take it away.
Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. As Lloyd said, my name is Blake Oliver, and I am a CPA, and I run marketing here at Giraffe. Before Giraffe, I was in public accounting. I was an outsourced controller at a very large firm, the biggest accounting firm in California, Armanino. And I worked with about a dozen companies, a lot of them startups, doing their accounting, their financial close, their budget versus actuals, variance reporting. And a lot of that was in Excel. And I suffered from Excel fatigue, redoing the same reports over and over and over again. And so when I encountered Giraffe, it was a revelation for me. And that was my motivation for coming over into the startup world. And the software side was making the lives of accountants easier. And I am joined today by Martin Zych, our CEO and co-founder, the brains behind Giraffe, the reason that it exists. Martin, maybe you could briefly give our attendees the origin story, if you will.
Yeah, so Giraffe was built up from kind of years of my life before Giraffe, working with startups, helping them build up their financial models, build up their budgets and their plans. I was an outsourced CFO and controller, and I did this for over a decade, and I learned a lot in that process. And basically, this was the tool that came from all that learning, sitting shotgun with CEOs nonstop. So like by the time we did our last venture fundraising here at Giraffe, that was my 16th time having raised venture capital. And it's about, we built the model, we built the needs for what you need to talk to investors, but then also what to run your business off of, because it doesn't just end with building a model. It's you got to track against it and go through that. So Giraffe, stemmed from all those learnings on that side, and excited to kind of share, this will be, that framework of how we think about that planning side for high growth companies.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. So Martin comes from the finance side. I come from the accounting side. Together, we are the yin and yang that is accounting and finance. So hopefully we can cover all of what you need to know to run a successful plan for 2021. But first, you might be wondering, what's with all the giraffes? I've got my friendly little giraffe, Jocelyn, here, and Martin is, he's got a giraffe there in the background. We named our company after the giraffe. It's a misspelling of the word giraffe, and you can say Jirav, you can say giraffe, whatever you like. The reason we did this is the most important thing, and it's because the giraffe is the tallest animal in the world, the tallest land animal, and so it has a really good view of the world around it. It can see where it's been, and it can see where it's going, and our goal is to give you a similarly great view, not just of where you've been financially, but also where your company is headed, to help you make that plan using integrated reporting, forecasting, budgeting, and analytics. And you can develop those plans, you can build those forecasts and budgets in a fraction of the time it would take you in Excel, and then easily roll those forecasts forward and keep your budgets fresh and up to date. Let's talk about annual planning. What is an annual plan? And I think this Dilbert comic does a pretty good job of explaining some of the challenges of annual planning. Dilbert's colleague says, I'm thinking of getting into the strategic planning game. If I understand the job description, you basically hallucinate about the future and then something different happens. You also have to pretend it's useful, Dilbert says, and his colleague says, really, that sounds hard. And unfortunately, that is often how annual planning is perceived, especially by the non-finance folks who are forced to do it every year and wonder, why do we go through this exercise when it ends up being different and we don't stick to our budget? And it's not that helpful. And the word budget, I think, is a big reason why annual planning is challenging. A lot of the time, the budget is the annual plan, and that's really the only thing that is happening, and that's a mistake. If you are just doing budgeting, your budget will not be accurate. It will be out of date very soon, right? And the budget done alone makes no sense, because the whole point of a budget is to help us get somewhere. So if we want to get somewhere, first we have to set goals. So that is a big takeaway from today's session: is you've got to do goal setting before you do your budget. You've got to set a forecast before you do your budget. And that all requires setting goals. So Martin, given your experience in the finance side of things, right, can you speak to some of the other reasons why we do goal setting before we do the budgeting and the forecasting?
Yeah, when we're thinking about that annual plan and that goal setting, a lot of this is about stakeholder expectation setting. So we've got a lot of venture-backed companies or companies with angel investors. You need to be able to manage those goals. You have a board, you have co-founders, you have a team, and getting everyone aligned around those goals and where you want to be, say, a quarter from now, a year from now. That exercise is actually really helpful in driving that growth off of that, versus a lot of companies just say, let's just sprint and go as hard as we can, and whatever happens happens. And if you have a goal and you can achieve that and you set that expectation right, then you're teeing yourself up for success. And then the other big part is that annual plan. Once you set this up, it's more than just an annual plan. It's about, you've got a framework of how you think about your business, and then that will allow you to kind of revisit this thing, and it becomes a living, working document.
We sort of already got into this, right? Like, why should we plan? You mentioned alignment. You mentioned setting stakeholder expectations. We have some other reasons to plan. And tell me, Martin, when you asked me to go find a screenshot from the Mighty Ducks movie, like, why did you do that?
Yeah, so this is from one of my favorite movies. They do the flying V, and they go, and basically it's their plan of attack on the market. And and as you think about your leadership team, you should be flying in formation like that. And when you've got that plan, you can go out and hit those goals that you want to achieve.
So I think a lot of us are sold on the benefits of planning. Why don't we plan? Well, one of the common reasons is often that we're too busy. So we say that we're too busy. Who has time to sit down, plan 12 months into the future, 3-5 years? Are you kidding me? And even if we did, how accurate would it be anyway? Budgeting and forecasting doesn't have to be that time consuming. We're going to talk about how doing it the right way can be game changing for your business. But there's another reason that we don't plan, and it's one that we don't really talk about. Martin, why don't we really plan?
Yeah. I think another big part is it's kind of scary. Like when you first try to do this, I see this when working with founders, it's like that, that ambiguity of what's going on in the business, and actually like putting pen to paper and saying like, this is what we're going to try to achieve. That writing that down is scary. Commitment is scary to goals that you're setting, to other people that you're like, we're going to do this. And, if a lot of people just push that discussion down the road, but when you think about it in a higher level, like we're going to help you out, through this discussion here today with a framework for creating this that will make it really easy. And then it won't be so scary, and it'll be actually, a good guiding path for setting that up for success here.
Yeah, and I think a big point is, and we'll talk about this, is doing the reforecasting on a monthly basis, because then one of those scary things, which is committing to your stakeholders, your investors, becomes a lot less scary if you're constantly reforecasting and setting those expectations properly. It's not like you've set this big goal that you're going to miss in 12 months. So let's talk about the planning framework. There's a specific order that is a best practice for doing planning. And number one, as we mentioned, is goal setting. you've got to figure out where you want to go before you can make a plan for how to get there. Once you've set your goals, you can start building your model. Some people refer to this as a financial model. We call it a driver-based financial model. That's the kind of model that we think is the best. So you've got to build up that business model. And then third, you've got to do your forecasting and budgeting. That's the fun part, where you actually create the outputs of this process and you can see, is it realistic? Are we going to get where we want to go? And you can set your budget based on that forecast. And then finally, tracking your progress to those goals. So that means reporting, that means dashboarding. If you aren't doing the reporting on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, you're not going to know if you're on track, and you're not going to be able to reforecast. And I had a question come in. Are we going to get a copy of the slides afterward? Yes, I'm absolutely happy to provide those slides to Lloyd, and we can shoot those out to you. So, goal setting. Step one in the planning framework. It's a very simple question. What are your goals for next year? But the answer to that question, or working through that question, can be really challenging. So, Martin, how do you recommend we approach this goal setting conversation as a team?
Yeah, so the key thing is, there's so many different goals for people. Like some people say, I want to double ARR, or like triple, double, every year. Other people might say COVID's happening and we lost half our customers. We just want to stay alive, and we need to watch cash. Other people want to say, I want to go from, a 100-person company to 200-person company and expand into a new market. So these different goals, when you start thinking about where you want to be, write down, your top 2 or 3 things. And it's, a lot of times it's not revenue goal. It might be, that operational goal. But that's what will then work towards figuring out what are all the steps it takes to achieve that.
And it could be minions, right? That's definitely not a revenue goal. It could be your head count. Absolutely. Yep. Right. And a lot of folks, that's how they target. They say, I want to double my head count in my company, because that if you can double your head count, you can increase your revenue if it's that type of business. So how do we figure out what we want to track, Martin?
Yeah, so there's kind of the framework I think about is you've got an operational metric. Like every business has some sort of North Star KPI that drives the business. Like a lot of folks here, I bet, are SaaS companies. So that might be like customer acquisition cost. You might say, here's our CAC, let's drive that, track that, see how we're doing against that. Another one, maybe you're an e-commerce company and you want to do website traffic. That could be a North Star KPI. Think about that one thing, and if you like maniacally focused on that 1 or 2 kind of North Star KPIs that drive the business, start with that. Now, the next kind of part is once that happens and you're growing from there, we go down, start going into the financials, and there's kind of within the P&L, the income statement, start thinking about revenue goal. Then whatever revenue you have to fulfill that. That's the cost of goods sold. This could be, your cost of your IoT widget. It could be your hosting costs going up. It could be people that fulfill your service on that side. And then the last one, we go through, think about, high level, the expenses. So you've got your goal set of where you want to be. Think about the people related ones on workforce, staffing, contractors needed to do this, as well as the non-workforce related stuff that a lot of times is driven by people, but it's a function of them.
So we've figured out our goals. We understand what we want to track, and now we need to figure out how we get there. So the next step in the process is to identify the key drivers of our business. And that's where we get to actually building the model. And this, depending on your proclivity for Excel or modeling, it can be a lot of fun. I actually really enjoy this aspect, especially when I'm not trapped in spreadsheets. So we'll show you the potential for that. So drivers, let's get back to that. What are drivers? There's a lot of definitions of the word driver. It can be the person who drives a car, which originally comes from the person who drives a team of oxen. It can be a piece of machinery that takes energy and or power and transmits that to the rest of the machine. It can be the printer drivers in your computer, right, that make that thing function. A golf club even, right, which drives the ball forward. But the definition that is the broadest and which relates to what we're talking about today is the third one here: a factor which causes a particular phenomenon to happen or develop. Basically cause and effect. So when we figure out the drivers of our business, we're actually understanding, how does it work? How can we simplify our business into a set of formulas and assumptions? So let's do some examples. Martin, can you walk us through how we identify a few drivers?
Yeah. So, like when we're thinking about revenue drivers, for example, so many companies, they say we're going to double revenue, but like you don't magically create revenue. I wish we could, it'd be awesome, but there's all this stuff that has to happen. Then this is where, when you're thinking, if you have a direct sales force, maybe it's how many reps you have times their quota times a percent of achievement that they get. If you are a self-service SaaS company, that might be a mix of paid ad spend and organic referral content that happens in there. Those are the things that happen before revenue becomes revenue. And when you think about your funnel, like everyone here loves growth marketing, and think about your funnel, those are the drivers of your model. And if you build that out in that kind of each of the steps that come through, that's how we would think about first starting up that revenue and going from there. Now, when you're going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, we had a question come in from an attendee. What if you're at a seed stage and you don't have a repeatable sales model yet? Is this still applicable?
Yeah, because when you're thinking about your sales model, for example, you could do many different ways. Like maybe you're trying to determine, do I want to be a self-service kind of sign up company, or do I need people to go do demos and show what I'm doing? And the economics of those are different. And you'll start learning, like, how many demos do I need times X amount of people that actually sign up? And am I able to make revenue that covers the salespeople for that? And you'll start learning about your pricing. And so this is a really, really important thing, especially when you're thinking about your go-to-market on that side. Like, play out the different scenarios side by side that way.
So this example might help to illustrate what we're talking about. So Martin, can you walk us through this example of a very, very simple model?
Yep. So what we've got here is you've got sales headcount on the top left, and we have one head gets us 5 customers per month for our theoretical model. And every month now, as long as we have this one person, it adds +5 to our total customers. And whatever it is that we sell, we could be, if you're IoT company, it could be that Bluetooth connected toaster plus the app SaaS subscription. If you are a services team doing consulting, it could be your projects that you do there. But this grows your total customer base, which then hits revenue. Now, to the right of that is a driver for support headcount. So you can't, you can't just magically double revenue and then still be able to fulfill it. A lot of times you need people to fulfill and to support these. And then we could say, well, I need one support person for every 25 customers. And when you start relating each of these steps in the chain together with a driver in between, you can now know, okay, that sales headcount on the left, after 5 months, we'll be at 25 customers. In that 6th month, we're at 30. We need to get another support person. Otherwise, we might not be able to support these people. And then from those support people, there's salaries, there's wages, there's benefits. You have that, spin the flywheel on that part of the model. Rent, you need, places for people to be. equipment, things like that. And then this all ties back into, that sales headcount. And as that grows, the top line grows. And this is, the simplest way to think about a driver in your business and each of the components.
So yeah, this is a very simple example just to illustrate the interrelation of different drivers and the waterfall effect. Like it's almost like money moving through the pipes of your business here. And there's leakage too, right? We have customer churn there that's impacting total customers. So your assumption for your customer churn is going to reduce your total customers every month, which then impacts your revenue. And the total headcount, like Martin said, impacts your operating expenses. A lot of times in SaaS businesses or tech businesses in particular, the headcount is the major driver of OpEx. Now, I want to make sure we're clear here. This is not how every business is. This is just an example of a simple model. Your revenue might be driven by something completely different. Perhaps you have an order-based business and you don't want to base it on total customers. You want to base it on volume of orders. You could have that be driven by website visits, something like that. And perhaps you don't even have salespeople. That's totally doable too. You would just change how this model looks. And I find that flow charting it like this is really helpful. When you actually build the model, it's going to look more like a spreadsheet. But this is a great visual way to do it. So getting back to our goals, right? We've built this model. Now we can use this model to figure out where we want to go. So let's say the big goal is to increase our net profit from 5% to 20% in the next 5 years. That's a pretty audacious goal. The model that we just went through can help us figure out how to get there. So if we go back here to the model, well, how can we increase net profit? We can reduce operating expenses, right? And one way to do that would be to reduce our support headcount. Can we get our support team to handle 30 customers per support head? That would then have a significant impact on our operating expense as we grow. And perhaps these assumptions change over time. Maybe we get more efficient as we grow as well. And we can program that into our model if we want to get more fancy with it. Anything to add there?
And this
Martin?
is, yeah. And so as you think about those ratios and the different drivers that spin the different parts of the business, look at that. A lot of times these are your core KPIs on a dashboard too. As you think about those, just revisit them every month or every quarter, and you can always improve these things through people, process, or product. So as within can hire folks in a different place. You could build an automation using technology, and then you don't have to hire people that way. Or you could figure out a process that then streamlines it, maybe takes out an extra step that you don't need. And that's that critical thing. And people think, how do I only grow revenue? And that's the only way I can become more profitable. But as you look at each of these different drivers, it's a really quick way to make you, 20, 30, 40% more profitable as you think about the steps there.
We had a question come through. Can you walk through this or sort of like give your perspective on this from specifically a B2C, business to customer perspective? I know we approach things a lot of times B2B, but B2C as well.
Yeah, so like an example, replace sales headcount with website traffic and dollars spent for Google ads. And, and you're trying to get you're creating Netflix for coffee, and you want people to sign up for your Netflix for coffee, and and it's a consumer thing, and they're going through, and that's a funnel. So you're doing your kind of marketing driven expenses, which might be $50 per new trial that signs up, joins into that. That's a very simple B2C example that way.
Gotcha. So swapping out that sales driven customer count with a marketing funnel driven customer.
Yep.
Cool. So you can see now that once we have that model, we can figure out where we can pull levers. Maybe it's a bunch of small levers, right? Maybe we're cutting costs on this side. Maybe we're increasing revenue over here. We can play around with a mix of them. So it's not just one that you're focusing on. You're looking for all the different ways that you can hit your goals. And then you'll hit on that mix as you refine this, right? This is a process that goes on over and over and over again that you want to do every quarter, every month even, to tune it, to figure out exactly how to get where you want to go. So that is building the model. Now let's talk about the forecasting and the budgeting. So that is the output of the goal setting and the model building. And one thing that we need to talk about, which we mentioned a little bit in the model section, is assumptions. Right? Assumptions are a huge component of forecasting. Martin, let's define assumptions. Let's talk about what they are. How do we pick our assumptions? How do we decide, what is the appropriate number?
Yeah, a key one is, when you're thinking about like a KPI or a driver, the assumption is a variable, and I think 95% of what I'd see on forecasting, people can say, A times B equals C for something in my model. It's very simple arithmetic in that, so that A could be a driver like cumulative headcount times B. My rate could be 25. For this example is office expenses. I need to spend $25 a month on stuff for the office for each of my heads. This could very easily be translated to travel, to the Dropbox subscription I need for everyone, to whatever tools I need, things like that. But when you think about that at that high level, that assumption is just the variable that then you can tweak. And we had a question about sensitivities in forecasting and budgeting from someone. That's where you would say, this is scenario B or A with the first assumption, clone that plan, and then do it with assumption number 2, and then you can see the difference on the output of the model.
Yeah, and that's where forecasting gets really interesting. Is you have your model, and the model is essentially the same for all of your scenarios, right? Your business model isn't going to necessarily change, and then you clone that forecast and you tweak the assumptions, and now you can see the impact of those changes. And sometimes it can be quite dramatic over time, especially if you've built in assumptions that change as you scale. And then you get those, we talk about this all the time in the tech world, those efficiencies of scale that we're all looking for, where we suddenly become, massively profitable in a few years from now. Another common assumption on the marketing side is one we've discussed already, cost per lead. So for example, if I spend $1,000 on paid search and my cost per lead is $20, I know I'm going to get 50 signups. If I tweak that cost per lead, if I can get that down to $10, all of a sudden I've doubled my signups for my app or my product or service, and I'm going to be much more profitable. So that's one of those assumptions that is like super important to get right and to always be paying attention to. So what does this actually look like? When we take our model and we plug in our assumptions, then we get our forecast. So Martin, you've outlined a very basic, like probably the simplest type of forecast you could create. Walk us through this so we can understand it better.
Yeah, so like, if folks want to make the simplest forecast possible, basically make, an Excel with each of these rows, and it's kind of a funnel for a lot of the stuff. And then make that, each of the rows, each of the columns is a month of your forecast, and think about, new customers that you have, less any leakage or churn if you have a recurring subscription business, equals total customers. And then that number, adds to the prior month's changes. Now that keeps growing. The revenue per customer is, whatever it is that you charge for your service there. That's the very simplest revenue model you can do. And you can, think about, how you get new customers, if it's, that marketing funnel, or if it's a sales driven funnel on that side. But once you have that, now you're able to know, total customers times revenue per customer is my revenue in my business. And you can start seeing, how that's a driver for revenue. Now, COGS is everything you have to do to fulfill that. So you double revenue. What are the things that will go up when that happens? And you build that up and you list them out, and you make them, same way, A times B equals C, or divided by, B. And you can do that. And you go down this list. And we found also within the categories here, especially in OpEx, this is kind of an industry best practice. If you think about these groups, you'll nail most of the scenarios of what you need to kind of plan for, and you won't have too many surprises there. And then it all comes down to net profit, which on the simplest model could be similar to change in cash, unless you have some receivables issues or something or delays, and make sure you add in that head count, because that's a really key thing. That how many people does it take to fulfill this thing on that side. And if you build this right, you can get to that change in cash and that final cash balance. Make sure that doesn't dip to zero, because then that's the lifeblood of the whole business to keep it operating, or the oil in the machine on that side. And this is the simplest model. Every little seed stage company, you can build off of this framework, and then get fancier from there as you need to. But these are the key things you need to think of.
And where it starts to get complicated is when you bring the balance sheet into it. And for the non-accounting folks, that means the delays in the cash. So like Martin mentioned, accounts receivable, accounts payable, if you don't get paid in the same month, you've got to account for that in your model and delay that 30, 60, 90 days at whatever ratio, you actually do get paid, because that will impact your cash position. You could make a simple model that doesn't account for that, and then you find out you run out of cash in 6 months because you don't have enough working capital to support that accounts receivable delay. Or for a B2C business, often you've got inventory. So you've got to outlay cash to purchase all that inventory so you can fulfill orders. And that all has to happen before you get the revenue. So you can see how very quickly it becomes complicated. That's where, you can build out a sophisticated Excel model. You can use financial modeling software. We'll talk about options for that to make that simpler. So one thing that we don't want to forget in all this when we're doing our forecasting and budgeting is to actually publish our forecast, to share it with our team and not just do it ourselves, and make sure that we get buy-in. Getting team buy-in is really important. Getting your stakeholders to agree. Maybe you missed something. That's key. And over on the right, you can see a screenshot of how simple it is to share a forecast or a budget or a plan in Giraffe. You just type in their email address, give them view access, and say, hey, check it out. They'll get an invite to come in and look at your plan. And we now have some pretty sophisticated sharing options where you can share just a view of a specific part of your plan. So if you want to give marketing access to view the marketing department in your plan, you can do that as well. The biggest benefit, Martin, maybe you can talk to this, is, when you share your plan, you actually are much more likely to achieve it, right?
Yeah, think about, if you make a New Year's resolution and you don't tell anyone, you're probably not going to do it to go to the gym. But if you post it on Facebook, like, I'm going to try to work out 5 days a week, you've publicly announced this thing. And I bet you anyone who's done that has been way more likely to achieve that. So going through that exercise and sharing that is really key, from creating like a circle of accountability within your team on that side.
Yeah, that last bullet point here on this list, having a specific accountability appointment with somebody you've committed to, 95% chance of achieving your goal if you do that. And that is where we get into the next step, which is tracking progress. So you can make a plan, you can publish that plan, you can share it with everybody, but if you don't revisit it every single quarter or month, you are not going to achieve it, or your odds of success are very, very low. So we need to be doing this on a regular basis. And this is where a lot of times doing it in the spreadsheets gets really challenging. So Martin, I'm going to let you talk about some of the reports that you recommend people use. You could build these in Excel. This is what it looks like in Giraffe. This is a best practice executive summary. Can you walk us through, why people should be sending something like this to their management team every month?
Yeah, so this exec summary, when I was a controller for high growth companies, I actually found my number one deliverable was not creating the accounting statements, even though we were, an outsourced accounting and CFO firm. I created an executive summary of the business, and it was literally that big summary bullet list that I showed earlier with the new customers and cash and the high level income statement. it's, a one-page report of the business. And if we stick, cash at the top, change in cash, 1 to 3 North Star KPIs that drive your business, and then that, the high level summary of the income statement. That one report, I've ran companies from, $0 in revenue up to a few dozen million in ARR, running that with our board and venture-backed companies. And it makes it really easy to, see the trends over time, see where things, change on a monthly basis, and then spot and have that discussion about the business. And if you can, create a framework like that, using, an Excel template or a tool like a Giraffe, once you set up that template once, all you have to do is hit publish, save, share it with your team every month, and drive that discussion.
Yep. And you can see down below in the KPI section, we've included headcount and average revenue per head, but you could put whatever North Star KPIs are important to the business. So if it's customers, then put that, right? If it is website visits, you can include that. Don't limit yourself to the financial information, right? A lot of times the financial information is secondary to the operational metrics that you need to use to budget for and guide your business. And then below that, that's where you have your income statement summary. And you can't see it on the slide, but we also, as a best practice, include headcount by department at the bottom as an optional item to include, because you want to budget for headcount. A lot of times the hiring plan dictates the financial plan. So if you're not hiring fast enough, you're not going to hit your goals. So then we get into sort of a more nitty gritty report, right? Budget versus actual. Martin, like best practices for this?
Yeah, the key one is, don't just budget for income statement, budget cash. That's really key. And watch your cash flow on that, and have a tool that allows you to do this. And that's why we put it right at the top of our exec summary. That's the oil for the whole machine. And also though, those KPIs that we mentioned, being able to variance the KPI versus what you expected, say it's something like and if it's a scaling metric for your business, like customer acquisition cost or CAC or something, that's really key. And when you see something off, the best practices, look through, take a look and see, is this a one-time blip, or is this a actual change in my business that's going to stay? And if so, let's tweak that assumption that we saw, in that driver formula, and go, okay, my assumption was off. Let's put it in with the new assumption and do that, that next version of the forecast with this, to see what, next quarter, next year will look like with that.
And this report, admittedly, a lot of people's eyes will glaze over when they look at this report. So that's why it's important to have visuals as well. So we support dashboards and analytics in our product. You can lead with this for the non-financial folks. So Martin, what is different about the way that we approach dashboards from, the products or the limitations you experienced in your role?
Yeah, the key ones are, we're bringing in, data that's both financial and non-financial data. And when you can put it side by side and do it in a simple way without having to go buy like set up a data warehouse and, have someone who's a Looker expert to write all these queries for everything. What we've done is kind of figured out the common questions that people ask, let you then point at the data that you want and visualize it in 5 clicks or less. And when you spot and you report on these things trended over time, that's when you really see like what's going on in the changes in the business. And that, there's that phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And, in one dashboard, you can literally share, 1,000 data points, and someone can comprehend it without actually doing math in their head and get it. And that's why I really, really love the visual side versus just, tabular reporting on a traditional report.
And I want to emphasize something Martin said, which is the ability to budget for non-financial metrics, for operational and workforce metrics. So an example is website visitors. On this dashboard, I didn't have a budget in my demo data for website visitors, but if I did, I could have displayed that. So we could see, here's our website visitors for January that we had budgeted for, and here's what we actually got. And a lot of times that's way more informative to how we're going to perform in the first quarter than our revenue number, which is in some businesses completely dependent on the number of visitors we get to our website. So that allows us to actually do something way sooner. And then rolling forward our forecast and our budget. This is the thing that just doesn't happen often. Why don't we roll forward, Martin? Like what was the challenge that you ran into?
The biggest part is, you're tracking data in the scope of actuals, which is, historical actuals that are going on. And then you've got, columns where your forecast starts, and then you have different scenarios. And when new actuals come in, it's, you've basically got to go through and rebuild your model every time in Excel. And that process, I'm pretty strong in Excel. It would still take all afternoon to get all this in, get that in there. But if you can figure out, a good way, like with a tool like Giraffe, where you hook up to the data pipes, and now you've got it running on Rails, rolling it forwards is as easy as just, changing a drop down that says, I have actuals through May, or I have actuals through September. It'll crunch for a minute, and then all the rest of your model will, automatically roll forward. And now you can see, how am I going to do my new scenario with the most relevant data, and do it really quickly. And that's the key thing, to drive that, that fast decision making there.
And it's okay if your plans change. They should change every month if needed when you roll forward. And that budget is not static. That budget is determined by your forecast and then can change. So you're constantly rebudgeting automatically based on your forecast. So that's it for those, that framework for planning. So to walk through it again, we had goal setting, right? And then we had building the model. And then we had forecasting and budgeting. And finally, tracking progress with reporting and dashboarding. So how do you actually do that? How do you make it happen? We put together a comparison of planning tools. As Martin mentioned, he built Giraffe. The idea for Giraffe came originally from struggling to do this in Excel and spreadsheets. And you'll see that, it's not easy to use. Usually if you do this model, it's going to grow too big. It's going to become difficult. And often you have to hire a CFO or a financial analyst just to run that model in Excel. And while it's cheap, Excel is essentially free with our Office 365 subscriptions. It takes a lot of your time, which is not cheap. And it takes you a while to build up those models. And one of the things that, we don't talk a lot about with Excel, but that concerns us, especially as finance folks, is the chance of errors, right? As those models get more complex, the errors creep in. And I was actually building an Excel model for another webinar that we did with Gusto. We wanted to give people like an Excel template to start planning for their business. And I even had like bugs in that thing, and it was super simple. And I ended up spending an hour trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And maybe that says more about my financial modeling skills than anything, but I think it's a problem, right, Martin?
Yeah, I'd actually add to that, like, we have a lot of times people will send us their Excel model and ask, how do I implement this in Giraffe? I've never yet gotten one customer who had a flawless model and they all had an error. And then when we rebuilt it with all the assumptions and it's off, they go, well, it's off. And we go, it's because we found this bug right here and you reported that to your board. And people are like, oh, holy cow. Okay. You saved my rear here. So,
yep.
If we do it on Rails like that, it's a lot better.
So you could do this with FP&A software, financial planning and analysis, enterprise level software. It's not going to be easy to use, though. It's going to cost a lot of money because those companies are selling to Fortune 500 companies a lot of the time. And it's going to take you forever to set up, months and months. You'll get that accuracy and the collaboration you're looking for, but often those integrations are custom built and take forever and are expensive as well. You got to pay extra for that. So we aim to solve this. There's a gap between Excel and enterprise software, and that's where Giraffe business planning comes in. Easy to use, affordable, super fast to set up, can take 2 weeks if you are doing what you need to be doing. And we've got the accuracy, collaboration with your team, and the integrations are pre-built. And we had a question from an attendee who asked if we integrate with QuickBooks or other accounting software to track progress. And I'm very happy to say, yes, absolutely. We integrate with QuickBooks Online, Desktop, Xero, Sage Intacct, and Oracle NetSuite, the most popular for accounting general ledger applications. We also have integrations with Gusto. You can integrate with any payroll provider with an Excel import. We even have a Google Sheets connection, so you can bring in all your operational data. So if you can get your operational data into a Google Sheet, you can bring that into Giraffe and start modeling with it. So we have a special offer for everyone. And this is not the end. We're going to keep answering your questions. So please put any questions into the Q&A that you have. If you request a demo at giraffe.com/traction, we will send you a baby giraffe. So not a real giraffe, one of these little guys. But if you prefer, we'll send you a hoodie as well. You can wear that around. You will also get 20% off your annual subscription if you sign up for a Giraffe Pro license by November 31st. So do a demo with us. We'll send you the giraffe if you do that demo. And if you sign up, you can get 20% off. So let's take a look at the questions, shall we? Where do you find bottom-up forecasting to be more effective, if anywhere? So driver-based forecasting that we're talking about, I think that is very similar to bottom-up forecasting, right, Martin? Like, are there any particular areas or industries where it's like super, super effective? I mean, I think it's always more effective.
It's like literally thinking through, each of the steps in your business. And when you do top-down forecasting, then it's very hard to, work. Then you have to figure out all the moving pieces to work up to a goal. But when you do bottoms up, you figure out all those moving pieces, then you see how that all adds up to what you need. And then you can just tweak a step on the bottoms up, and get to that goal seek that you're looking for. So I found it, I've been doing this stuff for, almost 20 years, and it's always a bottoms up forecast is more reflective of where you need to be, because it shows the assumptions and the thinking around how you think about your business. And that's what, an investor needs to understand when, a third party, your team needs to see the assumptions that are in your head that way. So I'm in a $10 million ARR company. I so badly want to drive a $0 base bottoms up approach to finance, but our teams are not quite mature enough. Any more advice on how to get buy-in from execs to dive into the model? Is a lot of one-off meetings, or is there a better process? So I think this is where, because it's like herding, sometimes in a bigger org like that, by that point, it's like herding cats, and you need to get everyone, to come in the same process. So the way I found it to work is driving, if you're the one that's in charge of the finances, doing a session on the goals of the business is really big. And it can also segue into like OKRs and things. And it's, what are the things that we want to achieve together? And when you lay it out that way, that process now sets the framework for, all right, so what are the things I need to achieve after that? And then really quickly it comes in, okay, so let's hire here, let's tweak the pricing here. And you can say, all right, let me corral that together in my model. And when you do that way, you're starting from the zero base, you can then, grow it and go from there. So I found that to be the best, process on getting kind of exec buy-in and going there. As a follow-up, what about when your bottom up is totally off from shareholder expectation? So this is where that rolling forecast part works well, because anytime as we start iterating on that process, and then you can say, I was off, but here is why, and it's that assumption that was off, and then you can have that conversation, and the sooner you can get to that, then the better on that. And then you can reduce surprises with shareholders on that side. And when you know what the root of it is, then you can drive action and say, oh, our churn was a little higher, or, oh, this ratio was off. And then you can, the shareholders, they want you to be successful, and being able to get to the root of something that's off, that's the really powerful stuff there.
We had a question about the onboarding time.
Yeah. So in terms of onboarding time, like we have a starter that you can set up a trial for, like a 12-month little model without departmental budgeting. That's got like guided videos and stuff, and you can do that in an afternoon or less. And then for folks that are on our pro product, That process can take a couple days. And we have a services team that will go through, help you, ask the questions that you need to about your business. So if you haven't thought about modeling, they're director of level, VP of finance type of folks that can help you go through that process. And, within, basically we can move as fast as you can move on that. And it's, a couple days process to get it all done.
And what about the cost, Martin?
Yep. So we have our starter product for $100 a month. Our pro product starts at $9K a year. And then so we can do that 20% off that annual subscription for folks who sign up through that Traction link for a demo on that side too.
Yep. And so, you're wondering like, what's the difference between starter and pro? If you're just, figuring out your business idea, if you're a seed stage company, right, Martin, I assume starter would probably be appropriate for many of those. And then pro, you get into departmental budgeting, you're starting to grow your organization, you need that control. That is when pro becomes really essential. You support folks who have no accounting or business knowledge whatsoever. I think you might be underestimating your knowledge there. Do you coach on how to create /apply /maintain and read? Well, I don't know if we don't have the capacity as a software company to like teach you everything you need to know, but I am really proud to say that if you go to our customer case studies page, you'll see a case study about a company called PopSpots. And Don was the CEO or COO, I should say, Chief Operating Officer of PopSpots. He started using our software, and he's not a finance guy, he's an engineer, but he found it easy enough to use where he upgraded his title to CFO. So rather than going and hiring a CFO, they decided Don is going to take on that role because he figured out how to use Giraffe. And I think that's a testament to how easy the software is to use. If you can, as a non-finance person, build a financial model and generate forecasts and budgets, you're doing like the number one job of the CFO right there. It's pretty cool. How does Giraffe differ from QuickBooks? QuickBooks provides financial statements. That is a great question.
Yeah, so the difference is QuickBooks is your historical accounting, and that's it. It tracks your transactions that happened up until yesterday or last month, and you report on it. Giraffe is where QuickBooks ends. So we are able to do all of the forward-looking statements, which QuickBooks cannot do on that side, and do it in that dynamic model, and then track the actuals against what what that plan was. So it's we're sitting on top of QuickBooks and complementary and adding basically superpowers on top of it in all the forward-looking side.
This is really the illustration of that. Imagine if you could have 6 months of historicals and then 6 months of a forecast on the same report. You can't do that in QuickBooks. And people are way more interested in what is going to happen than what happens.
That was fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining us.
I need some traction.